This program is made possible by the support of Delta Dental, Quick Trip, Marshfield Clinic Health System, Wisconsin Counties Association, Wisconsin Hospital Association. Watch Wisconsin Eye on Spectrum Channels 995 and 363 and at wisi.org.
Oldenburg, Ortiz Veliz, Peterson, Petrick, Plummer, Pronchinsky, Ramthun, Reamer, Rodriguez J. Gotcha. Roser, San Filippo, Schra, Skaransky, Snodgrass, Snyder, Sortwell, Spiros, Steffen, Steinecke, Summerfield, Swearingen, Token, Thiesfeld, Tittle, Trano, Tussler, Vandermeer, Peterson, Vorpagel, Wickers, Whitkey, Zimmerman, Mr. Speaker, Loudenbeck,
said I want to get up in the world, so they put me up here.
I'm sitting in Barbara's spot. Because Barbara's not here.
I have a video of the two answers for the
The hour of 6:30 having arrived, the assembly is in session. Will the members and visitors please take their seats? Members and visitors, please take your seats. I would ask the members and visitors to please rise. The prayer today will be offered by the gentleman from the 25th District, Representative Tittle.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. You know, every time I'm in this room, I'm amazed and humbled by the people of the 25th District have entrusted me with such an important job. I know many of you probably feel the same way. Please bow your heads with me. God, I ask you to protect and watch over all the elected officials in Wisconsin, including Governor Evers, Speaker Voss, and Majority Leader LeMahieu. Give all Assembly people and senators wisdom to do their job, kindness to be compassionate, and discernment to make the right choices, and the ability to govern as you would. Lord, Abe Lincoln once said, "Sir, my concern is not whether God is on our side. My greatest concern is to be on God's side, for God is always right." With that, I would ask for continued grace for the state of Wisconsin and the United States. I pray all these things in Jesus' name. Amen.
The Pledge of Allegiance will be offered by the gentleman from the 50th.
Pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
The first item of business is the call of the roll. As your name is called and you answer the call, the clerk will record you present. The clerk will open the roll.
Allen. Armstrong.
Present.
August. Balday. Bourne. Brooks. Cabral Guevara. Callahan. Dahlman. Doyle. Gundrum. Hintz. Hong. Jagler. James. Katzma. Kirkman. Kitchens. Knodel. Krug. Kuglich. Kurtz. Loudenbeck. Magnifici. McGuire. Myers. Moore Omundakunde. Moses. Murphy. Mersaw. Neubauer. Nealon. Novak. Oldenburg. Ortiz Velez. Peterson. Petrick. Plummer. Prunchinsky. Ramthan. Reamer. Rodriguez J. Roser. Sanfilippo. Schra. Shelton. Skoronsky. Snodgrass. Snyder. Sortwell. Spiros. Steffen. Steinecke. Summerfield. Swearingen. Tauken. Thiesfeld. Tittle. Trano. Tussler. Vandermeer. Vorpagel. Wickers. Whitkey. Zimmerman. Mr. Speaker. Hintz. Sanfilippo. Schra. Tussler. Bruing. Hintz.
The clerk will close the roll. There are 63 members. A quorum is present. Gentleman from the 27th.
Speaker, I ask consent for a leave for the day for the gentleman from the 3rd, the gentleman from the 15th, the lady from the 22nd, the gentleman from the 33rd, the lady from the 38th, the gentleman from the 53rd, gentleman from the 87th, gentleman from the 88th, and lady from the 99th.
Gentleman from the 27th, ask unanimous consent that a leave for the balance of the day be granted for the gentleman from the 3rd, the 15th, the 33rd, the 53rd, the 87th, and the 88th, and the ladies from the 22nd, 38th, and 99th. Is there any objection? Hearing none, it is so ordered. Gentleman from the 94th.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I ask unanimous consent for leave of absence requested by Representative Spreitzer in communication with the Chief Clerk be granted.
Gentleman from the 94th, ask unanimous consent for a list of folks from the Democrat caucus who would like to be marked as excused. Is there any objection? Hearing none, it is so ordered. The Assembly will now wait as we listen to the message from the governor. It's expected to begin at 7 o'clock, so hopefully that will be very shortly. So I would ask the members to stay in your seats. And just a quick reminder, during the address, I would ask that the members refrain from using their cell phones, which of course is not allowed in the assembly chambers. Thank you very much.
This evening. I'm Tony Evers, and I'm
Good evening,
incredibly proud to be the 46th governor of the great state of Wisconsin and to deliver my 2021 State of the State address to you tonight. The Wisconsin Constitution requires that each year the governor communicate the condition of our state. Now, tonight is probably the first time in our state's history a governor has delivered a State of the State address virtually and without a live audience. That means there's good news and bad news. The bad news is there won't be any applause or boos here tonight. But the good news is that means tonight's speech will take a heck of a lot less time. And since you're watching at home, you can be as rowdy as you like from the comfort of your couch. To begin tonight, I'd like to acknowledge some individuals who aren't here with us. The first person's name is Ben Belzer. Ben worked in my office, traveling with me about everywhere I went during my first 2 years as governor. If you've seen me out and about, there's a good chance Ben was by my side. You might have even talked to him. And for a good portion of this pandemic, Ben was also in my circle of five until we lost him tragically this past summer. My team and I think of him often, striving always to be more like Ben in word, in deed, and in service. We sure wish he could be with us here tonight. We miss him every day. Also not with us tonight are more than 5,000 Wisconsinites who have died due to COVID-19. They were firefighters, healthcare workers, nuns, educators, entrepreneurs, community pillars, students, veterans, volunteers, bird watchers, card players, and Packers, Brewers, and Bucks fans. They are moms and dads, brothers and sisters, friends and coworkers, and they are loved and missed by many. So tonight, I'd like to dedicate this address to those who we've lost this year, and the families, the sons and daughters, moms and dads, grandparents and grandkids, friends and neighbors left behind, who on top of everything else this past year have had to mourn the loss of someone they love. And I'd ask you to join me briefly in a moment of silence to honor the lives of these Wisconsinites we lost to COVID-19. Thank you. As I stood before you and delivered my second State of the State address last year, the world and our state looked much different than it does now. We are coming off a successful year, making a down payment on our priorities like fully funding our public schools, fixing our crumbling roads and bridges, and making health care more accessible and affordable. We put $330 million in general school aids, the largest in more than a decade, and funded a $97 million increase for special education, the largest ever. We provided more than $465 million in new funding for our local roads, highways, and transit aids. And even though my efforts to expand health care were rejected by the Republicans, we made critical investments in improving mental health treatment, supporting our direct care workforce, and increasing funding for our rural health care providers. So, we began 2020 with our sights set high. We are announcing a three-pronged plan to address our dairy crisis and support rural communities across our state. We are looking ahead to redistricting on the horizon, creating the People's Maps Commission to draw our state's next maps after the 2020 census and ensure that people choose their elected officials, not the other way around. We are pushing to return our state's commitment to 2/3 funding for our kids and our schools, and we are going to increase aid to our most rural school districts while providing $130 million towards reducing property taxes through equalization aid. Then, things changed overnight. We were going about our daily lives when a novel coronavirus hit, and we had to take urgent, necessary steps to prevent the COVID-19 pandemic from spreading. Suddenly, states and countries were asking folks to shelter in place. Kids and educators were learning and teaching from their kitchen tables, and so many began working from home, and those that weren't were worried about what this virus might mean for them if they went to work each day. When I delivered my last State of the State address, no one could have predicted the rest of the year would go quite like it did. What we now know about 2020 is that it was among the most unrelenting years many of us have ever experienced. If someone had said then that our special sessions to address our dairy crisis and provide funding for our schools and property tax relief would be met with inaction, if someone had said then, after visiting all 72 counties my first year in office, last year we'd only be visiting each other virtually and learning to use a thing called Zoom, if someone had said then that in a year's time we'd lost more than 5,000 of our family members, friends, and neighbors due to the worst public health crisis in a century, we wouldn't have believed them. I said then that the year would challenge the depth of our empathy and the strength of our selflessness, and it did, but in more and different ways than we could have ever imagined. Just take a look. First, tonight, I'm calling a special session of the legislature next week to take up legislation to invest in our farmers, agriculture industries, and our rural communities.
Tony Evers wants to put $250 million into our state's education.
As Amy Reed shows us, legislative leaders have other plans for that money.
It is a tragedy for Milwaukee, yes, but it's a tragedy for the entire state of Wisconsin.
Wisconsin has its first confirmed case of the coronavirus.
Today, I have declared a public health emergency to address the outbreak.
Tony Evers says all K-12 schools statewide will close beginning next Wednesday.
And the Wisconsin State Fair is also canceled this year, which is their first cancellation since 1945.
Lawmakers didn't even show up today knowing the end result. Republican leaders quickly decided they wouldn't take up the governor's request, arguing the election should and can safely happen on Tuesday.
Stop playing politics with our lives. You know, that's what I'm feeling.
This order is effective immediately. Safer at Home is struck down by the state Supreme Court.
This one fell swoop, 4 judges who have thrown our state into chaos.
Another American city is rocked by outrage over the police shooting of a black man.
I lost my cousin to police brutality in Chicago. I know how this feels.
But unfortunately, Wisconsin is in a much different and more dire place today.
Wisconsin just saw the 5 deadliest days of the pandemic so far.
Republicans have shown no indication that they will move on.
19 people have died since Monday. Do you feel any responsibility for the mess and, frankly, the crisis that this state is facing now?
Shepard, unfortunately, the state of Wisconsin is now in crisis mode. All hospitals across the state are either at
or nearing capacity.
N95 masks do not absorb tears when you are at a bedside, removing somebody from a BiPAP. Please help us save lives. Thank you.
It's tempting to look back and see a year rife with heartbreak, setbacks, and loss, because it was. From our healthcare workers to our students, Wisconsinites have been stretched to the limit, making immeasurable sacrifices for our neighbors, for our families, for our loved ones, and I know so many are tired. Our statewide efforts to contain this virus were met with costly litigation and resistance nearly every step of the way. We were grateful to be able to invest nearly $2 billion in our state's response. We distributed more than 26 million pieces of PPE and sanitizing supplies to hospitals, long-term care facilities, veterans' homes, and frontline workers. We provided more than $370 million to help stabilize our economy and support nearly 53,000 of our small businesses, more than 15,000 farms, and our lodging, hospitality, and tourism industries. We invested more than $200 million in helping communities across Wisconsin recover. But we know we have a long way to go to get our economy back on track. And unfortunately, many of the challenges of 2020 will no doubt carry into this new year. But as we reflect on these challenges, the magnitude of what this past year presented us, and the work we did together to prepare, adapt, and respond, let us also remember to grant ourselves grace, to permit ourselves perspective, to recognize our own resilience. Yes, our reverence and our patience and our tolerance have been tested by times and by each other. Yes, sometimes doing what's best and what is right lost out to elected officials who chose politics and political interest instead. Yes, there were moments where we could have offered a greater empathy, more humility, and better community than what we gave to those who, too, were carrying the burden of the last year. But despite all of this, we also managed to find the strength in the struggles we shared. We found faith in the kindness of strangers and who brought food and groceries to those who couldn't leave their homes, packing meals for kids so that they wouldn't go hungry even if they weren't in school, sewing and donating masks for others who couldn't afford their own. We found resolve in the voices of thousands, marching and echoing the call and repeat of generations in demand of the equity and justice we promised and have not yet delivered. We found perseverance in our farmers, growers, and farm workers and producers who kept working to make sure we kept food on our table. In our Main Street businesses and restaurants who reimagined and retooled to keep customers and their communities safe. In the men and women of our Wisconsin National Guard who have heeded the call to serve time and again, from our statewide testing to working the polls during what has been the longest Guard activation in our history. We found courage in the hospital rooms and hallways, and the doctors and nurses and healthcare workers who've braced themselves on the way to work and walked through the door anyway, who've comforted our loved ones when we couldn't, who even today have never stopped showing up for us. This past year asked a lot of us, and we've asked a lot of one another. But when we did, we found that the strength of our state is in what we're willing to face together, what we're willing to do for each other, especially when our neighbors need us the most.
Increased coronavirus testing will roll out this week across the state. Governor Evers' goal is to reach 85,000 tests a week.
Governor Evers is calling on the legislature to take up a package of criminal justice reforms they announced following George Floyd's death.
Bucks made history by boycotting a game just before tip-off.
Using our platforms for good and to inspire change.
Understand what these young people doing out here. Yeah. It's a great thing.
The governor told me today he wanted to thank the people of Wisconsin for the sacrifices that they have made during this quarantine.
To figure out what you're fighting for and keep that at the forefront. So this community, these patients, these families that are being affected by this, that's what I'm fighting for.
Changing the world is not hyperbolic. It's not some
far off idea, and we can create that society that is open, inclusive, welcoming, inviting to everybody.
He said it's working. We are headed in the right direction.
I know this year has been extremely difficult, and I know good news is hard to come by these days. So tonight, we must also offer our neighbors the promise of a better tomorrow, a promise that each of us must play a part in delivering by doing everything we can.
We love our future, and we don't want to mess it up. We want to help other people get their lives good.
Although the year is behind us, the remnants and hardship of 2020 remain. I know folks are eager to put this virus in the past. Frankly, I am too. I know so many are ready to get vaccinated and get back to the life we knew it. And we're working to distribute the vaccine doses as quickly and as fairly as we can. And while Congress recently provided additional resources to help support families and our state's response, we know it will likely not be enough to continue fighting this virus until we're through distributing the vaccine. There's always more work to do, and just as we have this past year, we're going to get it done. Now, 2 years into my first term as governor, we're not going to slow down. In fact, we're just getting started. Our forebears gave us a mandate to go forward, and we have, as we must. But forward was a challenge to us then, just as it is here today, not to move for movement's sake. In this state, forward isn't a metric of those who move the fastest. It's a measure of the strides we make when we all go together. As this past year has underscored, our course over the past decade has proven unsteady and uneven. For years, our state has plowed ahead unencumbered by the hopes of those we might leave behind. We are reminded now that in the fight for progress and prosperity, we each share responsibility. And it begins with broadband. This pandemic has underscored and in some ways exacerbated the digital divide that exists across our state. This pandemic has shown us firsthand that lack of access to high-speed internet continues to be a setback for kids, families, and businesses across our state. Students, educators, and schools making the shift to virtual learning were faced with a lack of access or unreliable connections that made it difficult to teach, engage, and learn. Folks trying to stay healthy and access basic health care services had trouble using telemedicine or other alternatives to visit with their doctor when they couldn't go in person. And businesses working to adapt and provide online ordering or payment options didn't have the technological tools or connectivity in their area. And in some communities, consumers didn't have the internet connection to take advantage, even if they could have. According to the FCC, more than 430,000 people who make up 25% of our state's rural population lack access to high-speed internet. Our state ranks 36th in the country for accessibility in rural areas. Earlier this year, our Wisconsin Economic Development Corporation released its Wisconsin Tomorrow report. It highlighted broadband as one of 3 priorities to begin our economic recovery, saying this: fixing broadband in Wisconsin is not a moonshot. It's not insurmountable. But it is critical to economic development and recovery and must happen now. So tonight, I'm excited to declare 2021 the year of broadband access. I'm proud that my first biennial budget invested $54 million into broadband across our state, the largest state investment in broadband in our state's history. Well, not to be outdone, we're going to do it again in this budget, except this time we're going to nearly quadruple it. My 2021-23 biennial budget will invest nearly $200 million over the biennium into broadband. That's 5 times the amount invested in the 2013, 2015, and 2017 budgets combined. It's 2021, folks. Having access to high-speed internet is no longer a luxury. It's a necessity. Every Wisconsinite across our state should have access to reliable, high-speed internet, period. Now, lack of broadband access isn't the only issue this pandemic brought to the forefront this past year. The last 2 months of the year, I worked with Republican leaders on a COVID compromise. And I called on the legislature to pass that compromise as the very first bill this session and to send it to my desk without delay. But tonight, I'd like to talk about the very second bill that should be passed by the legislature this session. And that's a bill to fix our broken unemployment system. Since the beginning of this pandemic, we saw an unprecedented influx of unemployment claims. It exceeded the number of claims even during the Great Recession. To put it in perspective, over the course of 4 years, from 2016 through 2019, the Department of Workforce Development handled 7.2 million claims. Well, since March, the DWD received 8.8 million claims alone, 1.6 million more claims than the 4 previous years combined. So as we saw a massive number of new incoming claims, we got to work reassigning state employees from other divisions or agencies and hiring and contracting new workers. We brought our staffing up from about 500 employees in our unemployment insurance division to more than 1,800 to answer phone calls, process claims, and follow up with folks who had applied for benefits. And during that time, the DWD paid nearly 600,000 claimants more than $4.6 billion in unemployment insurance benefits to folks across our state. But the bottom line is that our unemployment system isn't designed to handle the massive numbers of modern days, which has contributed to delay in processing claims, required more time to implement new federal programs, and made it harder to get benefits out the door. Our antiquated system isn't quite as old as I am, but it's been around since Richard Nixon was president. The system isn't new, and these problems aren't either. And Republicans and Democrats alike are to blame. The fact of the matter is that previous administrations and more than a decade's worth of legislators have known this system was outdated and couldn't handle an economic crisis like the one this pandemic presented. And they never took the time to fix it. And to make matters worse, the legislature has spent the last decade passing laws deliberately making it even harder for people to access these critical supports when they need it the most, exacerbating the problems with our already outdated system. This past year brought to bear the inaction of my predecessors and members of this and previous legislatures who avoided their responsibility and duty for far too long. Well, I'll tell you this, it's gone on long enough. It ends tonight. I'm announcing today I will be calling a special session of the legislature to take up a plan to modernize our unemployment system and help ensure nothing like this happens to the people of Wisconsin again. We know that replacing the system will take years. That's why it should have been done sooner. But it's also why we don't have another moment to waste. No politics, no posturing. Send me the bill and let's just get it done. And I want to make myself clear, if the legislature continues to ignore this problem, they gavel in and gavel out like they've done before, if they leave this problem for another administration, another generation, the people of the state will hold them accountable at the ballot box. Because this year, we're also going to fix another problem that's plagued our state for more than a decade, our gerrymandered maps. Last year, during my State of the State address, I announced I would be creating the People's Maps Commission, a nonpartisan redistricting committee of Wisconsinites from each congressional district who who would draw fair, impartial maps based on the 2020 census. So, for the past several months, the People's Maps Commission, selected by a panel of 3 retired judges, has gotten to work. They're hosting virtual hearings in every congressional district to hear feedback and input from people across our state to begin drawing the people's maps. Now, Republicans in the legislature said right away they'd ignore any maps the commission created. And that's not a surprise, given that in 2011, this legislature hired private attorneys to draw our maps in secret and behind closed doors. And because the legislature wrote themselves out of Wisconsin public records law, they were able to destroy many of the public records from that process. Well, I believe, and I know many of you at home do, that people should get to choose their elected officials, not the other way around. Wisconsinites don't want maps that favor any political candidate or party. We just want maps where either candidate can win. Folks, that's just common sense. So tonight, I'm announcing that my biennial budget is going to make sure that the legislature draws our maps in the light of day, in the public eye, and with public input by requiring public meetings for map drawing process. And that's why we're also going to prevent the legislature from destroying records from the map drawing process, because the people of our state deserve to know how these maps are drawn and by whom. And finally, and most importantly, we are going to require the legislature to take up the people's maps, which will be drawn not by any political party or high-paid consultants, but by the people of our state. Folks, it's time we look to the people, not politicians, to draw maps that are fair and impartial. Now, make no mistake, I do not underestimate the challenges that this new year may bring or the grief we're still grappling with, the ramifications we've yet to fully realize, the new problems that may arise still this year. But as sure as we will face struggles, we'll take them on together. We've made it through a difficult year, folks, and while it was discouraging, we aren't defeated. While it was trying, we're tough. Wisconsin, we've never been known for being timid, and we're sure not going to start today. Our people, our state, and our democracy have withstood tests before, and we will again answer the call to go forward unfazed. Be well, be healthy, and stay safe. Let's get to work. Let's move forward together. Thank you, and on Wisconsin, UW Marching Band, take it away.
Good evening. I would like to welcome and thank everyone who's joining us across Wisconsin. I'm Assembly Speaker Robin Voss, and I am honored to deliver the Republican response from the beautiful chambers of the Wisconsin State Assembly. Joining me in the chambers tonight are legislators representing every part of Wisconsin, from the beauty of the Northwoods to the banks of the Mississippi to the neighborhoods of suburban Milwaukee and all the dairy farms in between. Tonight, I want to begin by saying thank you to the people of Wisconsin. These past 10 months have been anything but easy. The coronavirus pandemic and the response to it have presented unbelievable challenges. And Wisconsinites, true to form, met these challenges head on. Parents became teachers, business owners struggled to stay afloat, and hospital staff and first responders worked extra long hours. Unfortunately, too many of you lost a loved one. Hearing the stories of people who weren't able to hold the hand of the person who they love the most in the world is heart-wrenching. Please know that our prayers and our condolences are with each and every one of you throughout the entire state who has lost and had to grieve for that special person in your life. To the healthcare workers, first responders, National Guard members, frontline workers, and every person who went above and beyond this past year, we are incredibly thankful for your service to your neighbors during this difficult time. So on behalf of the state of Wisconsin, thank you for going above and beyond in 2020. While we have had much to celebrate due to the sacrifice of those I just mentioned, unfortunately, there have been some major missteps during this pandemic that need to be resolved and a sense of urgency to do so. What we just heard from Governor Evers was a situation where he seemed to cast blame on others and accept very little fault for himself. The tens of thousands of Wisconsinites who lost their jobs through no fault of their own had to wait weeks, even months, for their unemployment insurance benefits. A legislative audit found that in the pandemic, less than 1% of the calls to the state hotline were even answered. Another audit found DWD had the information to clear those pending claims, but they just didn't act. These failures weren't brought on by ancient systems. They were brought on by a lack of leadership. These failures brought unnecessary hardship to Wisconsin families. The Evers administration owes these families answers and, in many cases, an apology. Even today, people are still waiting. 9,000 cases are in adjudication, and these aren't just numbers. These are real people struggling every day just trying to pay their bills. Just this past week, my own legislative office got 3 new calls from constituents who are still desperately looking for answers with their unemployment, and I know that my office is not alone. According to recent data from the federal government, Wisconsin continues to rank in the bottom of Midwestern states in getting first unemployment payments to people. Wisconsinites deserve better. What's even more concerning than the unemployment situation is the governor's COVID vaccine distribution plan, or frankly, lack thereof. A recent report showed Wisconsin ranked 10th of the 12 Midwest states for vaccine distribution. Wisconsin doesn't have a comprehensive rollout plan, few know where and when they can get a vaccine, and all of us deserve answers. With lives literally on the line, this is absolutely unacceptable. There seems to be no sense of urgency with the Evers administration. They've had months to develop a plan, and a subcommittee is still deciding who should get the vaccine next. Wisconsin is an embarrassment compared to other states. Let me just take a minute to tell you some of the things that are happening around the country that we could learn a lesson from. Arizona is ramping up its vaccine rollout by opening a 24/7 distribution center at its State Farm Stadium. West Virginia has one of the best per capita vaccination rates in the nation, and reportedly the first to vaccinate all the state's nursing home residents and staff, as well as assisted living facilities. New Jersey is planning to open 6 vaccine megasites, and a number of states have adopted drive-through clinics. What is happening today in Wisconsin? The subcommittee met today and decided prisoners should get their vaccines before your 65-year-old grandmother. That recommendation is available for public comment, and I need the people of Wisconsin to let the Evers administration how you feel about that decision that they're about to make. You can send an email to let them know your thoughts, dhssdmac@dhs.wisconsin.gov. It's important that you do that today. Governor, if you need help, there are offers on the table from the UW system and from the federal government. The vaccine distribution effort should be an all-hands-on-deck operation. There's no room for delays, and there are no need for excuses. Let me repeat that, we must prioritize the elderly and individuals with health complications. I join many others across the state, including a newspaper editorial board, a Wisconsin congressman, and pretty much everyone that we speak to. Governor Evers, do your job. The Assembly Committee on Health will be holding a public hearing on Thursday because we want to get to the bottom of this vaccine issue. I encourage everyone to listen in and send your questions our way in the hope that we can find the answers that all of us are desperately seeking. While we have many concerns on the vaccine rollout, there is some good news to share today. The Wisconsin Policy Forum today announced that the tax burden in Wisconsin is at its lowest level since 1970. Governor Evers can try to take credit for that, but credit goes to the Republican leaders of the state for the past 10 years who have done the hard work to make it happen. During that time, Republicans have reduced taxes by more than $13 billion. That's $2,000 for every man, woman, and child living in the state of Wisconsin. Because of our commitment to conservative budgeting, cutting taxes, and fostering our pro-growth reforms, our state is in a better financial position than many of our neighbors. In fact, our current state budget is projected to have a surplus, the rainy day fund is at a record high, and our state pension is fully funded. Now let's be honest about it, Governor Evers didn't intend it to actually be that way. His first budget proposal, which he just bragged about a few moments ago, if you recall, was a massive tax and spend wish list that would have grown the size of government, expanded welfare, and increased the gap deficit by more than $2 billion. Fortunately, the state of Wisconsin had legislative Republicans who rewrote the spending plan, removed the liberal policy items, and made the right priorities to keep Wisconsin moving in the right direction. Unlike the governor's proposed budget that raised taxes by more than $1 billion, our final budget actually cut your taxes by more than $400 million. Let me make one thing perfectly clear. To those of you who are listening at home, I promise you, Republicans will fight for another conservative budget. We'll keep spending in check. We'll continue our successful school choice programs. We'll protect the unborn. We'll reduce taxes even further, and we will ensure that free speech still exists in the Badger State moving forward. Republicans will also continue to fight for an exceptional education system for every single child in Wisconsin. For far too long, especially last year, many of the chairs in our classrooms around the state have remained empty. Why aren't we following the science when it comes to educating our kids? Scientists around the globe, including Dr. Fauci, say the best place for students is in the classroom. Let's bring students back to school. The COVID relief bill, as approved by the Assembly last week, addresses growing concerns that we have heard from our constituents. We will not turn our back on the families of Wisconsin. We will not turn our back on those whose children are falling behind because in-person education is determined at the whims of the teachers' union and liberal school boards. We won't turn our backs on Wisconsin businesses who are at the mercy of public health officials who make blanket decisions to close their livelihood. We won't allow anyone to mandate vaccinations on our citizens. And we won't allow the executive branch to continue to fail by spending federal assistance without public input. Last year, we spent time negotiating with Governor Evers, again, as he just mentioned. We did that with our Senate colleagues because we wanted to find common ground. It seems, unfortunately, some would think the only way to find common ground is to cave to the governor's demands. We will continue to work to reach a consensus as equals, but we will never compromise our conservative ideals in the name of political expediency. We look forward to bringing everyone together to support a more comprehensive COVID-19 relief bill, one that protects places of worship, limits government overreach, and allows for more, not less, public input. As President Ronald Reagan once said, as government expands, liberty contracts. He also said, freedom is never more than one generation away from extinction. Those are incredibly important words that Republicans will never forget. We won't let government grow out of control, and we certainly will do everything in our power to make sure that socialism does not take root in the state of Wisconsin. In closing, let me reiterate tonight what Republicans are going to work for over the next 2 years. We will work to help the state recover and heal from the pandemic. We will approve a balanced budget that doesn't raise your taxes, and we will continue to find ways to work together to make sure we do keep Wisconsin's motto in our minds of moving Wisconsin forward. Thank you. Thank you for being here tonight. God bless you, and God bless the state of Wisconsin.
Wisconsin State Assembly is back in session. Chair recognizes the gentleman from the 5th Assembly District. There's a resolution before the Chief Clerk that is privileged. Clerk will read the title of the resolution.
Assembly Resolution 6, honoring the service, leadership, and tenure of Robin Voss as Wisconsin's 75th and longest-serving Speaker of the Assembly.
Question before the body is adoption of Assembly Resolution 6. Chair recognizes the gentleman from the 5th.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I rise today to talk a little bit about this resolution that honors our current Speaker, Robin Voss, in his tenure as the longest-serving Speaker in the state of Wisconsin. I've been fortunate. I count myself as being fortunate to have served by the Speaker's side over the course of the last 10 years since I came into office. As a freshman coming in, Speaker Voss was on the Joint Finance Committee, so we had some interactions, but mostly was dealing with Speaker Fitzgerald at the time. But in my second term, was able to come in as Assistant Majority Leader and really get my first sense of who the Speaker was as a leader in that session as he took over the mantle as Speaker of the Assembly. I didn't have much experience with former speakers, as I said, but I can tell you that from day one, I was impressed by the Speaker's willingness to bring people together, to listen, to compromise, and his insistence that we protect the integrity of the institution above everything else. I'm fortunate, I think we're all fortunate to have served under Speaker Voss, because I don't believe any voice is ignored, whether they're Republicans or Democrats, whether they're supporters of the Speaker or not. I think he has developed an environment where all voices count, everybody is heard, and again, the best interests of the institution and the state are always placed first. So with that, I just want to say to my friend and my speaker, Robin Voss, how much I think we are all proud of him and his service to the state of Wisconsin. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
The question is adoption of Assembly Resolution 6. All in favor of adoption will say aye. Aye. All opposed, no. The ayes have it. The resolution is adopted. We are on the 15th order of business on today's calendar, adjournment. Chair recognizes the gentleman from the 5th.
The Wisconsin State Assembly stand adjourned pursuant to SJR 1.
Gentleman from the 5th moves that the Wisconsin State Assembly stand adjourned pursuant to SJR 1. All in favor of adjournment will say aye. Aye. All opposed, no. The ayes have it. The Wisconsin State Assembly stands adjourned.
This program is a production of Wisconsin Eye, an independent, nonpartisan, nonprofit media network with a mission to inform, educate, and engage the citizens of Wisconsin. Wisconsin Eye is the nation's first and only independently funded state civics broadcast network, providing gavel-to-gavel access to government proceedings and events at the state capitol.